Hi, everyone, and good afternoon. Thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Eileen Brewer, and I'm the director of the Takween Accelerator. We're going to have an hour and a half webinar today with some international representation. We will learn about how to find a co-founder and why it matters. We're going to hear from an investor's perspective on why co-founders are important, and we're going to hear a co-founder story about being able to work with strangers. So the first thing I'd like to do is talk a little bit about Takween. Takween is a project of Yanhad, an initiative to promote civic engagement and entrepreneurship for youth in Iraq, financed by the European Union and the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and implemented by Expertise France and hosted at the American University of Iraq, Suleimani. I would like to mention that we are having live interpretation today. So if you would like to hear the Arabic version, please select the German channel. If you would like to hear the Kurdish version, please select the English channel. I want to talk a little bit about the startup ecosystems, since many people in Iraq are new to startups and entrepreneurship. There are incubators and accelerators. Incubators help people work on ideation and their initial market research to start new businesses and gain the beginning business acumen. Some of the incubators in Iraq include 51 Labs, The Station, Orange Corners, and Siwas. Takween is an accelerator, and what we do is we work with advanced startups. They have already been in business for 1 or 2 years, and they have some revenue. We help you build your investment readiness and increase your business acumen. What we offer is a 12-week intensive training program that is a commitment of 6 to 9 hours per week with workshops, mentors, and assignments. We are in the middle of our spring cohort right now. Keep an eye on our social media for opportunities to apply and join our pre-accelerator programs in June and July. I want to just share a little bit of good news about investment in the MENA region. In 2020, during COVID, we saw a huge increase in the amount of money invested into the MENA region startups. We broke through the 1 billion mark, and this is during a COVID year. We will see this continue to grow. There is strong interest in investing in startups in the MENA region. 1/3 of the investments are coming from outside of the MENA region, which means we have the interest of investors from throughout the world. It's not just MENA investing in MENA. 30% are outside of MENA investing. So they're looking for you, the next great startup. Now I'm going to turn it over to Bassem, who will talk about what we're doing today.
Thank you, Eileen, and thank you everyone for joining us today for a very interesting topic. So this is our first webinar about business partnerships here in Iraq. We decided to have this session for several reasons. The first one is to introduce the concept and make sure that people are fully aware of what does it mean to have a co-founder or a business partner. Second thing is to validate the need for a full co-founder matching program that we believe will help startups to do better in Iraq. So why are we actually doing this again? Because we had an amazing startups that had applied to our program, but we had to reject many of them for several reasons. One of them, English language skills. So we have a founder who speak only one language, but they're not really good in English. So we couldn't accept them in the program. Second thing, we had as well founders who have amazing business, but they couldn't commit the time for the program. So we believe that if they had a co-founder that can support joining the program, they could do better on the long run. If we can see the slide of our application, Eileen. Yes, so we actually had 170 applications, but we excluded the oil and gas and the consulting from the statistics. So 129 applicants, we had 70%, 74 solo founders. So these people just took time to do the business and build the business by themselves. 25 female founders and 59 co-founders. So we believe with this type of programs, maybe we can help more startups to join our program and benefit to scale their businesses, not just regionally, locally or domestically in Iraq, but as well regionally and in the MENA region. And thank you to you, Eileen.
Next, we're going to turn it over to Isa. Isa is one of the strongest mentors and supporters in our Takween Accelerator. He is an investor, and he's going to share with us a little bit about the investor's perspective on solo founders versus co-founders. Isa.
Hello, you guys hear me? I hope you can. I'm going to start speaking now.
Yes, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. So yeah, I don't have any slides or anything of that matter. I like to just speak naturally and honestly. That's what I'm known for. So just to give you a bit of background to put things into context. So I'm a venture investor. I oversee a fund, a managing partner of a fund called Access Bridge Ventures. It's a newly established fund. We're only 3 months old, but I've been doing this for around 16 years in MENA. I've invested in over 65 companies. Everything from single founders to multiple founders, as well as funds across the value chain.
Isa?
Yes.
I'm just going to ask very quickly if you can speak just a little bit slower because we are doing live interpretation. Just
okay, perfect.
Great.
I'll slow it down. So I think the point of what I was saying is just to showcase, that I've interacted with founders across the value chains, and to a certain extent with the launch of this fund, and I'll come to that in a second. We are somewhat of a startup, right? So we are a new fund that looking to invest in companies, but we are also a company, an entity with various individuals working together, and so on and so forth. So I think before I get into the single versus co-founder point, I wanted to talk about what we look for as investors, because I think fundamentally, one or two founders, a founder or a co-founder, this is a very important element of what we look for. So as an early stage investment, people and founders and teams are the most important element of, the most important thing for us when we invest. At seed, which is mainly what I focus on right now, this is the core focus. Obviously, market size, demographics, the business model, all the fundamentals of what you look for in a startup are important. But the most important element for us at the beginning of the value chain, the beginning of the life of the startup, is the founding team. Why? Because end of the day, we're investing in you as a team, you as an individual, to take this business to the next level. You are people that we're taking a bet on. Can you pull it off? Are you a resilient team? And the ultimate litmus test, or the ultimate question is, if I invest in you now and you fail as a startup, which is very highly likely because that's how things work in the ecosystem, will I invest in you again in the next company? The answer is yes. That's the fundamentals of strong. Founders need to have a very strong relevant background, either it be the education, the fact that they've worked in similar businesses before. They need the skills and tool sets to be able to execute and deliver. In certain cases, as I mentioned, it's education. Certain other cases, it's other key elements such as work for a similar starter and have that skill set. Someone who knows their boundaries and ideally is open to getting support to complement their gaps. And I'll come to that, a very important one versus, this is a topic of solo versus co-founders. For example, I've invested in a company in the past out of the UAE in the e-commerce space. The founder was spectacular, but he plateaued. He did not know his boundaries and his ability to take that company to the next level. He needed someone to come and step in as CEO and him focusing on other parts of the business. That founder never did that, so that company ended up failing. Good communication skills. I heard you guys talk about language. Language is a very important element. Obviously, if someone can't understand you, the investor or your partners, then you have a problem there. But more importantly, can you communicate in a way, replying to people, setting up the right framework and governance to be able to do that? And more importantly, your ability as a founder to adapt to challenges, understand the ecosystem around you. So for example, a lot of the startups we invested in, when COVID hit, some of them, because of their strong management and leadership skill, the ability to delegate and communicate properly, wave that storm, well, still ongoing, but wave that storm quite positively. So that's generally speaking. I just want to give you guys an idea. It's half the time I'm allocated, but I think that's very important for people to understand and know what we look for as a team, as a founder. So I think to the question of solo versus co-founders, obviously any investor, anyone who is looking at this space will answer this question by telling you, you need to, ideally, it needs to be more than one founder. Why? Because number of reasons. I'm not going to get into all of them, but I'll mention some of the high-level ones that we like to see, or why we like to see co-founders. A, complement skill set. You as an individual may be the greatest thing in the world in your mind, but you may have gaps in your skill set. So you may be strong technically and not good at managing a team. You may be strong technically, but not good at running a business. So finding a founder, finding someone, a person or two, that helps complement the skill set gaps that you have, so that you as a team have a holistic approach to things. That's one very important aspect of it. I think the second one, I would say, mitigate risk. From my perspective, God forbid something happens to the startup, I need to make sure there's continuity and sustainability. So having more than one person will allow for that. I'll give you an example. I met with a startup today from Tunisia. Spectacular gentleman. His co-founder's father passed away, so she was out of action for a few weeks. The meeting still went on, the business is going, they're launching and going ahead. This is a simple example. 3, mitigating and delegation of your responsibilities and workload. Running a startup is one of the most stressful things you'll ever do. And having someone alongside you to mitigate, to take over some of that load, help you focus, and so on and so forth, is a very important thing. I think one other quick point before I come to an end is better decision making. So it's always good to have someone next to you to spitball ideas, to brainstorm, to talk about things. What's the word? Someone to criticize you. So for example, in my fund, my investment committee were 3 founders or 3 managing partners, let's say, or partners. Not everyone agrees with each other. So we have very constructive discussions on the board or IC on the various topics that we're talking about, that the companies we invest in. It brings a more holistic approach. All of this will eventually increase the likelihood of your success, decrease your stress, and mitigate the risk for both of you and the investors. And I think that in a very high level is what we look at. And I'll just use, because I know I'm out of time, 2 examples of areas where a co-founder worked. So one of the companies I invested in back in the day out of the Levant area, very strong company, 2 founders, they were doing very well. Obviously, the business slowed down. One of the founders decided he wanted to leave to the US for personal reasons. The company didn't die. The other co-founder stepped in, delegated, hired someone to replace the skill sets that his co-founder brings, and the business succeeded. And another example from the same region, it was a solo co-founder. The founder got so burned. The business was a great idea, but the founder didn't get someone to complement his skills, so he was micromanaging. He got so burned that unfortunately he had a heart attack. He's fine, everything is great, but he got so stressed that the business ended up failing because he was not there during that period where he was recovering. I don't know if that helps, but I think that I just wanted to give you guys, as an investor, what we look for founders and why the co-founder aspect of doing things is the best approach.
Thank you, Isa. It was great to have your contributions. I added some of the key nuggets of what you said. I put into the chat box. For those of you that are in the Zoom, you'll see it in the chat box. For those of you on Facebook, I hope that you are able to catch everything that he said. Mufti, maybe if you have a chance, you can grab some of the notes that I put in chat here and maybe drop it into comments on Facebook. That'd be great. We have some questions.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, so let's, I'm going to go ahead before you jump. Let me ask you a question. How important is it for VCs in MENA to have founders who have domain expertise in the industry that they're targeting?
It really depends on the startup and the domain that we're talking about, but it's definitely very important. So for example, if it's a highly technical business, let's say something to do with machine learning and very high computer science engineering skill set, it's advisable that one of the people who oversee and run this business to have that skill set. So I think to answer that question very quickly, it is very important, but it depends on the type of business. In certain cases, you may not need it, and you can hire the right people at the C level to fill that gap. But the more technical skills and the more savvy the entrepreneurs are or the co-founder is, the more attractive the opportunity is. Because when you pitch to me, you need to dumb it down to investors in certain cases, because we look at so many different subsectors. So if someone comes out who understands and knows what they're talking about, that brings that cycle together.
Great. Thank you. I have one more question for you. How many co-founders is too many co-founders?
It's a good question. I've never thought of that. I think 2 to 3 usually is a decent number, right? And again, depends how complicated. I've come across businesses that had 5 co-founders and are one of the top businesses in the MENA region right now. They're now down to 2, right? So I think 2 to 3 is a decent number.
Great, perfect. Thank you very much. Thanks so much for your time today. And Isa had another engagement, so we were lucky we were able to get him in here because he's a volunteer for many different startup ecosystems in the MENA region. So we really appreciate your time, Isa. And
thank you for having me.
Yes. Next, what we're going to do is interview a co-founder. So we have a co-founder, Sam, who I met through the Founders Institute, and he has 2 co-founders. Unfortunately, one of them has COVID and was not going to be able to join us today, but Sam is going to field all the calls on their behalf. So thank you very much for joining us. And he's joining from the US. So first, Sam, before we get started with the questions, could you tell us just a little bit about you, not your business, but just you and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born and raised in the States with international parents, but grew up and studied wireless electrical engineering in college. I thought it was quite boring when I finished, so I wanted to travel the world and understand people and cultures. That led me to eventually running a company called Hotel Tonight, based out of Australia, or the region, around the region of Hotel Tonight. We were acquired by Airbnb.
I'm going to ask you to slow down just a little bit for our live interpretation. So you had Hotel Tonight, and then it was acquired by Airbnb, correct?
Correct.
Great.
And then after that happened, I decided to find something new and got into online payments. And so credit card payments online, specifically embedded payments within operating systems. And during this entire time was really kind of how I came up with Candor and the idea behind it. Really was when we were running these regional and market specific territories, we hired a lot of freelancers to help us along that place, because we had a lot of leeway to have a lot of local area marketing specific to our region. And so throughout the last, I say 5, maybe 7 years, I've been hiring freelancers to do a lot of the heavy lifting for every single company that I've worked for.
So could you tell us a little bit about your startup, Candor? What does it do? Where is it based?
Yeah, so Candor, a very exciting startup we're very passionate about. And so the whole idea about Candor is to optimize the collaboration and relationship between companies and the freelancers that they hire. And so an example of this is, we see it's very easy to find a freelancer these days, with whether it be Upwork, Fiverr, TopTal. There's a lot of different platforms to find a great freelancer. It's just everything that happens after that becomes a bit of a headache. So we're trying to organize all of that chaos into one simple place. Everything from the contracting to collaborating with the tools, and of course the online payments and invoicing in one streamlined system.
Great. So you were in the US, based in the US, you decided you have this idea for a startup, you have some experience in being a founder before. So you start Candor, and then what happens?
Well, I wouldn't really say start Candor. I think that's probably the first point is, I had the idea, and I'm not a technical developer myself. So I was kind of just thinking through about how this would look, what it would feel like from a user's perspective. But at the same time, I had no way to build it myself unless I wanted to just hire somebody and pay them to build it. And it was probably a few months that I was just speaking to a lot of my friends and colleagues about this idea and just kind of trying to, validate it for myself. And at that point, one of my close contacts said, you should speak to my friend Victor, who is a developer, and he's actually looking for a bit of a side hustle right now. So I just kind of took it as it was and said, oh, I'll have a quick chat. And as soon as I spoke to Victor, I had built a very, very, very terrible version of the website and platform just on a PowerPoint. And so I just kind of ran through Victor. So this is, the basis of my idea. This is kind of generally what I think it might look like. If it interests you, would love to have somebody come help me build this and be a co-founder because I need it. I don't have development expertise. And so he was quite captivated, and very fortunately for me, he decided he would come on and build the product.
So you invited him to be a co-founder before even looking at any of his development work?
No, so I did go through a long conversation with him about what he had done in the past. He's quite skilled. He'd worked for Snapchat in the past, for example. And also just before I spoke to him, talking with my friend about his skill set and what he'd done in the past, I had full confidence just kind of through my own network that he was very skilled and also a good person in general.
And how far apart were you, in the same city or in different cities or states?
So he's French, but based out of New York.
And you're in
cities. Atlanta.
In Atlanta. So you guys are in two different states, thousands of miles or kilometers apart from each other.
That's right.
And you invited him to be a co-founder you didn't even get a chance to meet him in person yet?
Never in person, no. I met him for the first time, I think 1 or 2 months ago.
Wow.
And we've been working for about 7 months before that, just kind of generating, getting this off the ground.
Yeah. It's like Bassam and I have been working together since June, and we haven't met in person yet, but you'd never do it.
No, not these days.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. That's great. So you had Victor come, and Victor built out the platform for you. So now you have your website up and running. You have one of your co-founders. So what happened next?
So actually we weren't up and running quite that fast. No.
You're still building.
Exactly. Still building. And so one of the things that really kind of came up is Victor is a back-end developer, very, very talented. But especially looking at the space, our first target niche was going to be towards designers and the marketing teams and companies. So keeping that in mind, we knew we had to have something that was decent enough looking. And so at that point, we decided we needed to bring on a front-end designer for the platform. And so what we did was what I've always done, just gone on and hired a freelancer. And so we interviewed about, I would say, 7 different designers to kind of build this platform for us, and really spoke to them not only on just their design portfolio and skills, but also on the matter that they work, of course, how we can collaborate if we're happy with them as people. And so we actually, after interviewing about 7 people, landed on a lovely guy named Z, based out of Serbia. And he had a great wealth of experience from designing multiple Fortune 500 companies and being a freelancer designer on his side. And so he designed the platform for us. And at that point, just because he came from a whole nother perspective, his work was phenomenal. He'd been working for us for 2 months, just kind of on a paid hourly basis. His deliverables were great, but at the same time, he brought an entirely new perspective from the freelancer side that we didn't have at this point. So his knowledge just on being able to tell us what it was like from a freelancer's perspective. And he was so passionate about what we were building and saying how much he loved it and can't wait to use it. So at that point, we had a few other things in the pipeline to build, and just decided to ask him if he would be interested in coming on as part of the founding team.
Wow.
Very, very kind of limited cash at the beginning. So instead of just paying somebody hourly, it was much more in our interest to have somebody aligned with a whole different perspective that we needed, and a great skill set that we didn't have.
That is amazing. And you said he's in Serbia, is that right?
That's correct. So never met Z in person.
So you have not met him?
No.
No. And how long have you guys been working together?
It's been about 7 months now or so. So quite a long time, but one day soon we want to make a trip and meet him.
So that's great. So now you have the three of you that are running this startup, and you were the first one that had the idea, but didn't do the development. So can you talk a little bit about how you decided to share equity? What are the like the percentages, or if it's on, are you using a vesting table or anything like that?
Absolutely. And it kind of comes down to the point of never meeting these people before. While I'm quite a very trusting person, I also don't want to be, naive in a lot of ways. And so I definitely put in vesting schedules for 4-year vesting with a 1-year cliff. And so that means, I guess for everybody that's not aware, that if you work for less than a year and then you leave the company, or the other two co-founders push you out of the company for not delivering what you're supposed to do, then you get nothing. But then after that 1-year cliff, you start vesting every month until 4 years. If you continue with the company, you reach your full percentage. And so the percentages and 4-year vesting was very easy to come up with, just kind of on who brought what to the table, how long they had been working on it, and how many hours and kind of amount of expertise they were bringing. What really kind of takes a bit longer than that is to go as granular as possible on what is expected from every single co-founder on the team, myself included. So I myself was with a vesting schedule with a 1-year cliff. So if I left within a year, I get nothing.
Great.
So, want to make sure that everybody's feels like they're part of the team, and, especially in the early stage environment, you have to have that.
Yeah.
If you don't have that trust, then nothing's going to get done. Nothing's going to get off the ground.
So that brings up my next question. I have one from the audience where they're asking, how do you manage that difference between your non-technical business management schedule of when you want things done, and then the technical schedule of how long it takes to get things done? Like, how are you negotiating that?
That's I think that's something you'll come across your entire life, whoever asked that question. Something I've come across every company I've been with. But basically it's about having you don't want to take too much time just writing out a useless planning session. But what I do, and kind of the way that I've found a lot of success coordinating things like that, is because again, this has all been a bit of a part-time job for us, so we understand the limitations on time. And so we always have a weekly call the same time every week to catch up. And before that call, I've got a weekly memo that I send through, and everybody's got their parts to fill out. And so we fill out either the updates on whether it be the development, whether it be on the sales side of things, whether it be on, some commercial or legal aspects. We fill in all of our parts. And that way, when we do get on our call, whether it be 30 minutes or hopefully an hour, it's very much faster to read through something than just have an open conversation. And so we read through the memo. It's quite succinct. Everybody knows within about 10 to 15 minutes exactly what's going on with everybody's perspective. And then we can ask questions from there, update timelines, and then just have a bit more of an open conversation about the things that we don't fully understand.
So you mentioned that you had already had a previous startup that got acquired by Airbnb. How about your other two co-founders? Did either one of them have any previous founder experience?
Yeah, so I guess just to clarify, I didn't found Hotel Tonight.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's all right. I would be very, very happy somewhere rolling around on a beach one day. They did very well. I just ran the Australia, New Zealand region.
Okay. Oh, great.
Yeah, it was still a great kind of experience and going through all that. But so my other two co-founders, Victor, the developer, has never, I don't believe, started a company himself, but he's worked for Snapchat and other environments within this space. And then Z, he runs his own design firm. So you can kind of consider that a startup, I suppose, in a way. If you want to think of it more of a consultancy, maybe you can, but he's had great success. And so I think there's a lot of parallels in between starting a consultancy and a startup as well there. So that'd be the experience, I guess, on founding the teams.
And then did Z speak English fluently, or are there any challenges with language?
No challenges with language. And that was a big part of that hiring that we did when we sourced out our designer, to make sure that the communication was very clear, very clean, not only just being English speaking, but where we could very much understand exactly what was going on. I speak to people from my hometown where I can't feel like I have a conversation with them and I know what they're going on. So yeah, communication was one of the top things I look for whenever hiring somebody.
That's great. And then your business has some expenses, like you're needing to buy licenses, you have some types of expenses coming up. So have either of the other co-founders pitched in, or how are you managing the money coming into the business?
Yeah, so that was part of our terms when we laid out who was getting what percentage and what everybody was bringing to the table. And so we just divvied it up that way. Some of the co-founders put in more money financially. Some of the co-founders were putting in more hours per week. And so we just had, we dragged that conversation out for must have been 3 weeks. That was not something I wanted to rush. And so we made sure that everybody was very clear, very happy, and very understood about what everybody was bringing to the table. Our expenses have been quite low, which is the benefit of having a founding team that brings a lot of different pieces to the table. And so, we don't have to hire a developer, we have one. We don't have to hire a designer, we have one. We don't have to hire a legal team. I've got experience in that. We don't have to hire somebody from online payments, bring that as well. So to make sure that everybody had their skill set, we can actually run quite a lean business until we want to really stage ourselves for growth.
That's great. So you have 3 of you who are working from 3 different locations. You have met one time, and the other one you have not met yet. You're all working in as part of the team, but you haven't released, correct? So you haven't launched, you haven't generated any revenue yet. So you're all basically working for free, and for how long now?
Yeah, so we're still private beta, hoping to release next week, which we're very excited about. Had a lot of great feedback on what we have out there. So we did take some time to make sure we're set up before we kind of do a public launch. But yeah, the feedback's been great. And we've been going, let's see, I had the idea many, many, many years ago. It's just kind of evolved for a while, but I think we started development in just the end of July last year.
End of July. Okay.
Yeah. So
yeah,
it feels like a lifetime, but at the same time, it's gone quite quick. So,
but it's less than a year. So I think one of the key takeaways is oftentimes founders are afraid to show the world what they built, and they feel like that it needs to be perfect. So could you talk a little bit about how you go through that decision making and saying, yes, now's the time, even though I know it's not completely built the way I want it?
Absolutely. And I think there's probably a lot of different opinions out there on this one. My own personal one is that I wanted to tell everybody and anybody I could about it as soon as possible and show them what we've built, even if it's completely buggy and does not work. And that's always been kind of my mindset. Having said that, before we do any press or any kind of, public PR material, blogging sites or anything like that, I wanted to have it all tight. That way, when random people kind of come and look at it, it's a little bit different than kind of your controlled environment where I've got a lot of leads that I scrape and talk to them directly and kind of preface them that, it's not perfect, but have a look and get the whole idea and concept. And if you can have a look and just see if it's something that would be interest of you, if it is working perfectly, can you give me some feedback on that would be excellent. And so and every time I have a demo with somebody, even before I even talk to them or show them what we've built, I'll really just take as much time as possible to understand their current pain points within this process that we're trying to solve. And then once we kind of really dig into those pain points specifically, then I'll show them our demo, which even if at that point it's very buggy and doesn't look good, you can definitely get some impressions from them. And also some great feedback on what would help them that maybe we don't have. So I think that's the reason it's taken us so long to do a public launch, but we have been working with users, speaking with users really since day one on this.
Oh, that's great. And then, so what would you say to someone who has a software product right now, similar to what you're doing, and they're hesitant to launch? Like, what kind of nudge would you give them?
You go for it immediately today.
Do Do
I
you
would
hear
say,
me?
absolutely. So yeah, I would say take 10 to 30 maybe people that you might know that'll give you feedback. Just actually ask them. Don't be nice. Just give me the direct feedback as possible, because people are always nice, especially your friends and family. So even if you can maybe find people that aren't in your tier 1 network, that's probably your best bet to go to. And just scrape maybe 30 leads, go out to them. But it's a lot easier to scrape those leads, approach them, have the conversation, and then demo, as opposed to just having a public launch where people come to your site, see that it's buggy, not great, and then leave with a bad kind of a bad mindset. So that's my own personal opinion. I know there's a lot out there, but it seemed to be successful for us so far.
Great. So I'm going to go back a little bit. When you were picking your front end UI designer, and you said you mentioned that you interviewed about 8 of them. Did you have any kind of a competition or ask them to create any mock-ups for you, or did you just look at their portfolio of work?
So just looked at their portfolio, and the reason being is that it was a short-term hire, and so if they weren't good, no sweat off our back. We just wouldn't rehire them again after the first week. It would be a minimum cost for us, really, in that sense. So if we did have them do a mock-up, it probably would have cost the same as actually hiring them to do the job in the first place. So
right.
Speed was a bit of a thing in that sense, getting off the ground quickly. So that was the reason for that. But if we were looking for a full-time, if our contract length was going to be expensive and long, we certainly would have done a bit more of a kind of actually prove what is on your profile kind of scenario.
Great. And these questions don't match what I sent you, because we're getting great interaction with the audience here. So,
that's all right.
So the next question I have is about final decision making. How do you go through that if you have 3 people and you disagree on something, or you have different points of view? How do you do that decision making?
Yeah, so that's the benefit of having 3 co-founders.
That means if you just have A and B, right? If you have AB, but you can't have,
exactly.
you can only have AB testing. You can't have ABC testing.
Exactly. So yeah, two will always overpower 1 in a tripod. And that's a huge thing for me as well. I at this point in my career kind of know, I guess, who I am, and I have a lot of crazy ideas. So I throw a lot of crazy ideas out there, and having 2 people that are very smart and measured in everything that they do is a great way for me to kind of weed through the good ideas and the bad ideas.
Right.
Which is
Very good.
90% bad ideas. So I'm very, very comfortable with taking and presenting those ideas to them now. And we've got a kind of good system established over the last few months.
I'm curious if for building out the vesting table and the equity, did you use Slicing Pie or another app or tool?
I did not use an app or a tool. I know there's some great ones out there, and they're really great for templates. I just, again, we took a lot of time making sure we divided all this up and what we were bringing to the table and what percentages. We all have the same vesting schedule, so the 1-year cliff with 4 years. But then it kind of came down to how much time, how much efforts and experience we brought that kind of made up those percentages.
Great. I'm going to ask Mufti or Bassam to go into the Q&A and read one of the questions for me. I'm unable to read it, and I'll move to the next question. So they're in Iraq, there's a little bit of trust issues. So what would happen if one of your co-founders took all the source code and left and sold it to another entity? What would happen, especially if you're dealing with somebody who's in another country?
Yeah, so that's, I guess, the benefit of having some legal framework put in place as well. So we do have, we did establish a corporation, a Delaware C Corp, and so we did have kind of in all the legal terminology that everybody had to sign when they came onto the company. That basically you can't do that. This is all part of the company's assets, and so. That is a very important part, especially when it comes to the trust issues. You want to mitigate those as much as possible. And so that's where just having a bit of a legal framework established at the very beginning, as soon as kind of everybody agrees on the vesting schedules, the co-founder equity shares, I think, just making sure that you're protected in that way is very, very important. So if you want to hire a lawyer, certainly do that. There's a lot of kind of startup online law programs now these days that can kind of put more generic things in place. So if you have a generic startup, then that's a good way to start and very cheap. But yeah, that's what we did in that case.
So talk about trust, because yes, you have that legal framework set up. However, you have a guy you've never met who is in Serbia or tells you he's in Serbia. So, and you have a contract, but like, how do you build that trust?
Yeah, and that's something I suppose the answer probably I have is I don't have another option. I guess especially from the technical and development side. But there are different ways to back that up. So we also have a staging server now. So we have backups for all of our code. And so everybody has different access to things like that. But at the same time, to answer, if for example, Victor, our developer, wanted to completely ruin everything, he could. I guess that is something huge, but at the same time, he's heavily vested in this now as well from his own time and experience. So I can't see that happening. But I guess you just have to have that trust in that sense. If you don't have that trust, when you think of the successful companies in the world, how many of them were one person that went from start to finish? I can't think of too many examples. If you have some good ones, show them. Definitely send them to me. But yeah, I think trust is something. If you don't have trust in your team and your co-founders, you'll just never get anywhere, really.
And then what would you say if somebody brought in a co-founder who felt very good in the beginning, and then all of a sudden, just like, or maybe over time, the relationship is deteriorating, and you need to end the relationship because it's at risk of killing the company, right? And so do you have some ideas on how to approach that? Because the 1-year cliff is about if someone leaves, but how do you ask them to leave? If is there legal language around that?
Absolutely. Look, fortunately for me, I haven't had that with Candor yet. Just the three of us, we've had a good run. But just in other companies and in the past, kind of from what I've seen and experienced, that's why making sure it's very granular and detailed when you are setting up roles and responsibilities in the beginning. And so that way, if somebody is lacking, you don't just have the black and white conversation. You can approach them saying, look, we understand this is what you signed up for. This is what you agreed. This is what you wrote down that you were going to do. It doesn't seem that it's becoming the case lately. And so what is it that I can help with? Or what is it that you need from our team to make sure that you're able to give your full commitment and make sure that you're committing and fulfilling all the details that you said you would. So if you have that conversation and it still doesn't improve, it makes it a lot easier for that next conversation. And again, that's also the benefit of having the 3 co-founders, because then at that point, if 2 are on the same page, very well aware that the other one is not pulling their weight, again, you have that framework to be able to make those decisions. And I
was just thinking the same thing when you were going through it. I thought, oh, so 3 actually is going to work better than 2.
Yeah, so 2, I'm not sure how to answer that one. I guess again, kind of the same thing, but just make sure you're detailed on what's expected.
So if you had to start all over again, go back to July, and now you have 9 or 10 months of knowledge, what would you change? Is there anything you would do differently?
Absolutely, always. This one actually is quite easy, and it's more probably product based than I guess co-founder and conversation based in that sense. But when we started, our initial idea and kind of my initial focus was building out like a digital asset management system to be able to take all of your photos, videos, documents that are in either your Dropbox, Google Drive, and be able to access them with permissions and AI technology in a very fast and easy way across all different people. And while that's great and people are using it and we love it, during a lot of the conversations with these freelance designers and the marketing teams that we spoke to as we were building this, kind of came down to they would while that was great, a much more valuable feature for them would be to have a very well articulated style guide that the company could share to the freelancer. And when speaking to the companies, especially the companies that use freelancers are usually startups and smaller companies that don't have an internal team. And so the majority of them didn't have a style guide, didn't have the time or the money to go spend and get one made. And so we have our updated feature is a style guide generator that comes out and you can build in less than 5 minutes. And this has been beyond far and away the best well-received kind of feature and feedback we've got. So if I was to do it all over again, we would have just started with that.
Right.
Left the digital asset manager for later down the pipeline. Because we probably would have been able to launch about 4 or 5 months ago if that was the case.
Oh, wow. Wow.
But, next week, hopefully we're ready to rock and roll.
So for those that don't know, can you please describe a little bit what a style guide is?
Absolutely. And so if you're in marketing and sales, you probably know this, but a style guide is just a very simple document that every company, I think, in my opinion, should have, that articulates and writes down specifically every single time you put out, whether it be a marketing campaign, partner-facing material, even your website, anything that anybody internally or externally sees regarding your company should be consistent in their messaging, not only verbally and the language that you use, but visually. So the colors, the fonts that you use. And a good example, if you saw a Coca-Cola billboard and they had a different color red than you're used to, you would probably look at it and say, Coca-Cola didn't put that up there. I don't trust that billboard.
Right.
And it's the same thing with a startup company. If you're putting out different messaging and different visuals with everything that you're doing, you're going to lose a lot of trust very, very quickly. So when working with a freelancer, especially as a startup company, when they're doing all of your marketing, either your website build, anything around what you're putting out there, if you don't have a very simple, well-articulated framework to give them, their designs are going to be all over the place, especially if you're using different freelancers for different aspects of this. Then it will be inconsistent and you'll look a bit amateur. And just kind of beyond that, there's proven metrics that say having a style guide increases your ROI exponentially.
That's great. So ROI is return on investment. So if you have a style guide, come up with what you want your fonts and messages and colors and logos to look like early, so that everything you build is from that base, is what we're hearing. We have a question from Bassam. Bassam, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi Sam. This has been really interesting. And I have one question. So you mentioned you asked your co-founder to join you because you're limited in cash. As well, the co-founders or the team will have to make money as well, just to eat, to pay rent, and the other stuff that they have to do. So is it okay with you just to offer them to work for part-time and work for part-time for someone else to have the money for them just to pay the bills? And then do you have a time if you will go to raise funding and after that they have to commit to leave their part-time job so they can join you, or they have actually full-time jobs? So how do you manage that?
That's a great question. And it's actually very much part of the conversation we had when we were, founding Candor and building out our equity share and cap table. And so right now, all three of us are doing Candor part-time. We all have full-time jobs on the side, which, pay our lives. So that was very well understood. And then we also have had the conversation about kind of our raise rounds and what we're looking to do. And so as soon as we release and start getting some traction, we'll look to raise our seed round. And our seed round, and we've already had this conversation as part of what we detailed, was only going to be really kind of for product focus. And so with that being said, we would get Victor, our developer, on full-time. I would still stay full part-time at this point. And then we would have, extra developers and product people we would hire on at that point. And so if we're, hopefully things go well, we get to a successful seed and have a good growth from there on the product side and kind of good metrics to show on usability. At that point, we'd look for a Series A, and then we would all come full time at that point. So that's our strategy. Of course, everybody's way different on that. A lot of companies are very much, sales growth driven at the beginning, but we're trying to make sure we've got good retention rates on the product, good usage, and if we can show that, we think we'll be ahead of the game in this space. And money is a bit more of a booster ship for growth in the eyes of what we're seeing right now.
So what I'm hearing is that you're being very honest with your investors about you're not trying to pretend like you're all working full time in the business. You're being very transparent and authentic and saying we're working part time, and with the initial funding we can convert one to full time and then grow as you go, right?
Yeah, and to that point, maybe I'm not sure if it's to a fault, but I've had two actually investors saying they would fund us as if we were full time already. I'm not going to lie to anybody ever. That's not my style, but that is something that's come up. So maybe to think about, I guess, for anybody out there, that we see quite a lot that one of the biggest requirements is having at least one full-time founder.
Yeah. And then is there any other feedback you've been hearing from investors regarding having 3 co-founders?
That it's good. No negative feedback on having 3 co-founders. In fact, there's a lot of people that would never even look at a solo founder in that sense. So that's the only thing really that I've heard. So that hasn't been part of the conversation for any investor I've spoken to about our team or kind of what we bring to the table or why we've built the team the way we've done. So very, very fortunate and happy about that part.
That's great. I'd like to ask about what have been some of the biggest rewards that you've had by having these co-founders?
Oh my gosh, this is countless, I suppose. I think I'm a pretty resilient guy. I've been in sales for 10 years and I get told no 100 times a day. But, there are moments, especially when, you're going out to try to raise money and you get, 15 no's in 4 days straight, that you kind of just are like, oh gosh, how long is this going to take? And then the next thing you know, the guys push a big product update that's phenomenal and it looks incredible and you're so happy with it. And so just the whole, I guess, mental aspect of keeping your motivation and making sure that everybody's moving forwards and happy. And, that really helps because there's a lot of lonely days, as I'm sure you all know, if you're just going at it alone. But having co-founders and having people to speak things through with, make sure that, you're not just going down a rabbit hole of something that nobody will use. It's very good just kind of for sanity checks, as well as just, again, making sure that motivation and everybody's on the same page moving forwards and excited.
So do you have any patents or intellectual property that you've filed, and tell us a little bit about that process?
So for our company, no. Look, we're not the only people doing this thing that we're doing. We're just trying to be the best at it and the fastest. With, I guess, online software and things like that, it's probably less of a patent style industry. So I know if you're in hardware or things like that, is certainly something you want to get out ahead of and make sure that you're protected. But no, not for us. We're basically just trying to make sure we listen to our users as much as possible, build the best products out there that we can, and then hit the market as fast as possible once we can kind of showcase that we've got something really good to offer.
Great. And then I have a question about interviewing for cultural fit. So did you have any type of cultural type of questions that you asked when you were talking to these potential co-founders? Like, do you have beer on Friday, or do you do other things?
So no, and I guess that's because we are remote. We get along really, really well, and that's something you can kind of just gauge and sense. I was never asking what they were doing on the weekends or anything like that. But during the conversations, just kind of what companies they've worked with in the past, how they operate, how they deliver things, how they communicate to people. Those are just things might seem like offhanded questions, but I asked them for a reason. And so, listening to their answers and how they portray themselves was, I could usually get a good gauge on their culture and how we work in that sense.
Great, thanks. Let me check this next question. Should you set a closing metric for the startup? An example would be if in 2 years we are not at X as a metric, then we close. What do you think?
No, definitely not. I understand why you would, but I think Isa was saying this as well about adaptability. I mean, if you can imagine yourself putting a closing metric a year and a half ago and then COVID hit, that might just be a huge demotivation for the entire team saying, oh, well, we had to hit this. I'm all about goals and metrics, but a closing one to shut everything down, I don't know if that's something I've ever considered or thought about.
Okay, great. Those are all the questions that we had in the queue, and I just want to thank you very much for your time. It's been very interesting to hear from your perspective how you did that. I had not met before a co-founder who brought co-founders in as strangers and still operating in different countries and have not met. So it's a great story. It's very interesting to learn from. If you have questions, you can drop it into the Q&A and we'll go ahead and ask them. But until then, I'm going to switch over and share some slides that talk a little bit. So if you don't mind hanging in, Sam, if some questions come up, we'll bring them to you. I'm going to just—
Of course, thanks so much again.
Great, thank you. I'm going to share a little bit about what we were talking about on equity sharing and common mistakes and things that you can do to improve or to address this issue. So 90% of startups make this mistake. They decide early to split the company a certain way. Maybe I've been running for a year and then you just join me and we agree on an 80-20 split. Or maybe Sam immediately gave 50% away to a new co-founder that he found and they're 50-50. And oftentimes there's no contingency plan. So what happens when you do this, you're giving equity share early. And what it's like is paying somebody a full salary before they've done any work at all. So what you need is something called dynamic equity split. Equity awarded over time based. This gives you a fair way to share the equity. This gives you rewards for contributions. This provides ongoing motivation and it is flexible so you can address change. What you end up having is compensation for investing your own money, compensation for investing time, and compensation if you have IP or patents, if one person is contributing intellectual property or patents. So there's a way to set up a table and make all of these decisions. One of the ones that I'm aware of is called slicing pie. It started out with a book first, and then they have since released an app. So you can actually go to their website and you can put in scenarios and it will give you some results. They have a free version for a solo founder. So any one of you can go there now and use the free version and put in some scenarios, and it will help you figure out how you should be slicing the pie. Their formula is that your share of the equity should be the value of your contribution divided by the total value of everyone's contribution, which sounds a little confusing, but if you go in and look at the website, they have a book you can read, they have an app you can play with. It will help you learn about an easy way to figure out how to share the equity. It will give you motivating long-term commitment to those who jump on board and they've been in for a year and you still haven't launched, and then you're in for 2 years and you're just barely breaking even. How do you keep them motivated? Having this vesting table that Sam referred to is one of the ways to do this. So a vesting table means in 4 years, at the end of 4 years, you get this percentage that we discussed. So maybe the table was set up, the equity sharing, maybe it was 25%. You don't get the full 25% right away. Vesting means after 4 years, then you get 25%. And if you leave within the first year, you get 0. That's the 1-year cliff. So if you leave within 1 year, you get 0. At the end of 2 years, you would get 50%. At the end of 50% of 25%. After 3 years, you would receive 75% of your 25%. And after 4 years, you would receive 100% of your 25%. There's many different ways to figure out the calculations based on the contributions. So and this was what Sam was talking about, like how many hours people are putting in impacts their contribution numbers and what the equity is and how that sharing is happening. So I recommend going and checking the book and the website that I mentioned. And we're going to go ahead and open it up for questions. So the goal of this webinar today is for founders who have some skill gaps, can find co-founders. One of the ways that you can do this is to reach out to us. We are at the American University of Iraq in Suleimani. We have many MBA students and MBA alum. So if you are technical, or even if you are struggling with English, we have a large alumna pool of MBA graduates that speak English fluently. They might be a perfect co-founder for you. And likewise, if you are someone in the country that has some ideas or some skills, you can go out and start researching who the founders are in the country and offer to join their team as a co-founder and bring your skills. So it's an opportunity to start building your network. You can do this through LinkedIn and other tools. You can go to 51 Labs or the station and see who some of their founders are, ask about whether or not anyone is looking for a co-founder. And we're going to send you a poll after a survey to all the attendees to ask what your interest level is. If we receive a strong enough interest, then we may put together a workshop where we bring you together. If we have some founders and some people interested in joining, we could develop a 2 or 3 hour workshop to help you understand. We would dig into slicing the pie a little more, and we would provide a matching opportunity. So we're going to go look over here at the Q&A, see what we have. So we have Wassim, who's looking for a co-founder that's based in Iraq. So we would need, he's technical, so he may be looking for an MBA or business. So Wassim, you go ahead and reach out to us at Takween at auis.edu.krd, or you can chat with us on any of our social media platforms. Mufti is here. Mufti takes care of and manages all of our social media platforms. So if you drop a note to us on any of those, we'll catch it. You can also go to our website and send an email through our website, and we can help you with mentioning a little bit. You'll give us a little more about your business, and we can share it with our alum and see if we can get someone interested. Mohammed says you should open a pool or a forum for founders to meet in MENA, or do a recurring event for founder networking like speed dating. So that's exactly what we're thinking about starting. So we wanted to have this initial webinar first to see if we had anybody show up. So luckily we do. There's an interest. We have people showing up. We have over 50 here, plus we have those who are following on Facebook. So we will do a survey afterwards, and then we'll move to the next step to see how we can help founders and those who are interested to be co-founders to meet with each other. Mufti, are there any questions coming up in our Facebook stream? I can hear you. Yes. Do you have a question from one of the others?
هیچ پرسیارێکتان هەیە؟
I can hear you. One of our translators is in. Are you bringing us a question? Nope, maybe not. Okay. I don't see any other questions coming in. So if we have no other questions, we're going to go ahead and close the session, but we will send a survey out to everyone who registered to get interest in whether we should do some more events like this or make them deeper where we can create a space where people can meet each other. I want to thank all of you for attending today. It was great visiting with you, Sam, and thank you, Isa, for his support. And we'll see if we can move this topic further. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Great. Thank you all. Have a great evening.